please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
Well, fresh investments in India have plunged to a 13-year low as stalled projects have risen. In that scenario, what can the infrastructure space expect from the Union Budget 2018? Mahesh Vyas, the MD and CEO, Centre for Monitoring the Indian Economy, joins us now to talk about that. Mr. Vyas, good morning and thanks so much for joining us. Before we ask you about your budget expectations, tell us what the ground report is in terms of new projects, whether they have increased or decreased. Have the stalled projects risen lately?
So the story gets depressing every quarter.
Oh God.
The last quarter, which ended in December 2017, showed us a new low in new investment projects being proposed. So that's really very disturbing in the sense that new investments just don't pick up. But not exactly disturbing, because there is also now a clear built-in expectation that investments will not pick up in the short run. I in fact don't expect investments to pick up in 2018 as well, because capacity utilization, whether in manufacturing or the power sector, is so low, and there's no good reason to believe that that demand will pick up, and so therefore there's no good reason why industry should invest again. So it's not surprising anymore, but it is depressing for sure.
Okay. Well, actually what I found more depressing is that even the rate of completion of projects is not improving, Mr. Vyas. I can imagine projects getting stalled, but at least some other projects completion, you're not seeing any improvement?
Yes, so in the last 2 years, that was one of the redeeming factors of the capex data, that while new investments were falling, the completion of projects was increasing, and that was really very good. We reached 6 trillion rupees worth of new completions last year, but we are seeing a very sharp fall in that this year. And I think this ties in with the story that new investments are not being proposed, and the ones on hand are not getting completed because of the same reason. The demand is extremely low. So people will not even complete the projects on hand currently.
Okay. So before we come to the
regarding demand.
Okay. So before we come to the budget wish list, you know, is there any sectoral color to this? Where are projects getting stalled most, and where are they most incomplete?
Well, it is essentially in the PPP projects, mostly in the power sector or metal sectors. These sectors which had seen big investments in the preceding 5-6 years are now in trouble because there's excess capacity in power, for example. But there's some offsetting of this in other infrastructure, mostly in transport infrastructure.
Okay.
Okay. And what can you, or what should we expect from the budget this time around to, combat all of these problems?
Well, expectations is a tough word to deal with. I'll say my wish list will be that the government should do two things. One is aggressively pump in money into building new infrastructure. I think we should build more than we believe we require. We require to build excess capacities on roads, on airports. We require an airport not only in Bombay and Panvel, we require one in Thane too. We require a few down the require a lot more infrastructure. We require an aggressive plan to spend a lot on infrastructure, because that will automatically lead to employment and then growth. The second thing is, I think the overall spending of the government needs to be higher. So it's not only about directed expenditure, but I think we require to improve or increase substantially aggregate demand.
Okay.
So I'd be a little benign over wastages as well, so long as the money is spent and the government expenditure offsets the decline in aggregate demand in the country. That's when the private sector will start investing.
Yeah, that's a fair point. We do aggressively need infrastructure, but what would your request be? More in terms of tax holidays and incentives to make the private sector invest, or greater spend by the PWD departments of the various states and the central government?
Well, not necessarily the PWD department. What is important is the government needs to put in money through partnership with private sector. through the PWDs, through whichever other means, but the government needs to just say we need to build these roads, we need to build these airports and seaports and so on and so forth very aggressively. That's what we did to come out of the last infrastructure bottleneck when Atal Bihari Vajpayee was the Prime Minister. We set up this huge ambitious plan of building up the Golden Quadrilateral, the Northeast, West, South corridors. So that aggressive plan changed the face of the country. We suddenly had good roads everywhere in less than a decade's time. So something as aggressive as that on the one hand, and on the second hand, we just require to increase aggregate demand.
So what are you looking at in terms of a total outlay? Because the last budget had a spend of almost 3.5 lakh crores for infrastructure, including railways. If I'm not, correct me if I'm wrong. What is the expectation this time around?
I don't have a number to that. I think I put myself exactly in the position in which the Vajpayee government was. After a few years of liberalization, we saw that the private sector by its own cannot set up infrastructure as was envisaged earlier. And the government took upon itself to empower NHAI and go aggressively on infrastructure. That's the kind of plan we require now.